The immortal Mr. Whiskers had always prided himself on being a dignified cat. He lived in a cozy home in the heart of Istanbul, where he spent most of his days lounging in the sun, lording over his subjects as Cat Sultan of Istanbul and sipping on catnip tea. His life was perfect until a mob of unruly new neighbors moved in. They were loud, obnoxious, and kept large dogs that barked incessantly. They had insufficient respect for cats and often made fun of the immortal Mr. Whiskers for being lazy. It was only a matter of time before he decided to take matters into his own paws. Something about the new neighbors' names bothered him. He knew that he had heard them before. Briggs, Richardson, Gilling, and Martens. He had encyclopedic knowledge of history, being a time-traveling immortal cat, and soon made the connection. They were all descendants of the crew of the Mary Celeste. They should not exist. They were supposed to have disappeared in 1872. The immortal Mr. Whiskers assumed that this historical aberration was his fault. He was the only time traveler around as far as he knew. Either he had changed history or created an alternate timeline with his constant meddling in the past. He did not think any other creature on this planet would have the intellect to build a time machine from scraps of wire, a sewing machine, animal parts, and bottled lightning. So, the immortal Mr. Whiskers sat down in front of his time machine and began to plot a course to right what was made wrong by his meddling, or maybe he was just plotting to get rid of his obnoxious new neighbors. He knew that he had to travel back in time to ensure that the crew never completed their voyage and disappeared forever. The immortal Mr. Whiskers traveled back in time to the year 1872, just as the Mary Celeste was about to set sail. He materialized on the deck of the ship, right in front of the crew. "What in blazes!" exclaimed the captain. The immortal Mr. Whiskers ignored the captain's outburst and began to meow loudly. He knew that his voice would carry throughout the ship and create enough chaos to prevent the crew from sailing. The crew members looked at the immortal Mr. Whiskers in confusion. They had never seen a talking cat before. "Who are you?" asked the captain. "I am the immortal Mr. Whiskers," replied the cat, "and I demand that you abandon this voyage immediately." The crew members burst out laughing. They thought that the immortal Mr. Whiskers was a joke. The cat was enraged. How dare they not take him seriously? He decided to take matters into his own paws. He considered going back in time to retrieve an Elasmosaurus, but decided against it, as he was, after all, just one tiny cat and dinosaurs were hard to handle. He decided to use his time machine to create an illusion of a sea monster. The immortal Mr. Whiskers traveled back to the present day, where he had stored the materials needed for his plan. He gathered up some seaweed, shells, a large inflatable octopus, and adorned it with the face of Lady Gaga. He then traveled back to the year 1872 and carefully placed the fake sea monster in the water around the ship. As the ship sailed, the crew spotted the illusion of the sea monster. They were terrified and believed that it was a sign of impending doom. They quickly abandoned the ship and set out on lifeboats, never to be seen again. The immortal Mr. Whiskers watched from the deck of the Mary Celeste in disbelief as the crew members rowed away. The time-traveling talking cat didn't strike fear into their hearts, but one inflatable octopus with a hideous human face terrified them into abandoning their ship in the middle of the ocean. He was pleased with himself for finally getting rid of his neighbors, but puzzled by human behavior. The crew had disappeared, history had been corrected, and he could finally live in peace. As he traveled back to the present day, the immortal Mr. Whiskers couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had shown the crew who was boss and ensured that they would never bother him again. He returned to his cozy home in Istanbul, where he resumed his life of luxury and relaxation, knowing that he had won another battle against the hapless humans. The actual identity of the immortal Mr. Whiskers is unknown. He could be any cat, even yours. So check the links in the description to make sure you are showing him proper respect. The end. Subscribe for more bad AI sci-fi.